Hola mi gente, welcome back to my channel. I am XO Joe. Today's a super special video because I got to sit down and chat with Allyson Dahlin about her book, Cake Eater. Allyson Dahlin is a debut author and I think her book is just spectacular. I've talked about it before, so enjoy the interview. Hi Allyson, it's so nice to have you on here and talk to you about your book.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, I actually got your book through an ARC, so I got the ARC version, loved it so much, bought it when it was released in hardcover. You have such a gorgeous book. I have it back here. It's such a
Yeah,
gorgeous, I love it.
I'm really lucky. She's such a cool artist. Her name's Agnes Reichert. If you go on her Instagram,
Beautiful.
she does a lot of cool stuff.
Yes. I've talked about your book before in a different video, but I was wondering if you could give us a quick rundown of the book in your own words and like what it's about.
I think I first pitched it as Marie Antoinette meets Black Mirror because it's the French Revolution story and Marie Antoinette, but in like a really like cyberpunk world that's heavy on technology and surveillance and
Mhm.
capitalism is evil, which is usually the cyberpunk theme. Black Mirror Marie Antoinette, it's her story, but in like a world that's a lot more like ours, except a little worse.
Yes, definitely. We're definitely going to get into those things with some questions I have ready for you. This is going to be cut into three parts: decoding your book, about your writing, and then this or that, because I always think those are fun. So, with the first question I have here is like, what made you choose the historical character Marie Antoinette and why set the story in the future?
I was really obsessed with that Sofia Coppola movie from like I think it was 2006 about Marie Antoinette. That came out when I was a teenager and I thought it was really awesome and I watched it a million times. And then when I went to France and I went to Versailles, I remembered I had this like Marie Antoinette phase where I was interested in her and
Yeah.
the French Revolution in general. Like there's so many interesting people that were alive and on different sides of the politics at that time. And I'm interested in all of them. Marie Antoinette, I guess, just felt like could be applied to a lot of situations and issues that are happening today. Like she made a lot of sense as a social media influencer,
Mhm.
as someone who gets misquoted, or someone that's like both loved and demonized instead of seeing both sides of her and seeing her as a person. So
Yeah, that's actually a
that's
really
what I want
good
about
point.
it.
And that was one of my questions where you said, while you visited Versailles, you could see Marie's story easily happening today. And I was going to ask, like, what do you mean by that?
I rewatched that movie when I came back from Versailles, and I want to say I don't remember because I was pretty young when it came out. I think there's like these things like she wears Converse in it and like has a modern soundtrack. And I think I read that they were trying to make this point of, oh, the teenagers of Versailles aren't so different from like a teen living in LA
Oh,
today or something. So I
oh,
was thinking about that. And then my mind went to like, oh, like I was just like kind of thinking almost like AUs of like, oh, what would it really be like today? But when I thought about what like the lifestyle of the court of Versailles was like, it became like super creepy and dystopian in my mind. So I just
yeah.
kind of took it like one step further from today.
Yeah, we love a dystopian novel in YA for sure. We haven't seen many
Yeah.
of those recently. So I love the twist on setting it in the future and also adding all that social media stuff you were talking about. Like you mentioned being misquoted or misunderstood. So much happens to poor Marie in your book. So could definitely see that happening today. You also set up Marie's world after the event, which was the peak of climate change. At least that's what it sounds like in the book. Now her world has technology that even scares her social group. Is there a part of you worried by the technology in today's world and where we're heading?
Yeah, well, definitely really worried about climate change. Like it's weird because at the same time, I think technology is the answer for a lot of things facing us, but
Mhm.
it also, especially in like the past couple years, ever since like 2020, a little before 2020, technology does scare me a little bit too, just because it seems so easy for people to spread misinformation and
Yeah.
twist the truth. And the internet is just really convincing and it's set up in a way where it kind of something like Twitter depends on us spreading like exciting information that gets everybody
Mhm.
talking, whether or not it's the truth. So,
Like headlines are kind of bad behavior rewarded, right?
yep,
Realized.
yep,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think you really
definitely.
hit that so well in your book because Marie only ever knows the apps. It's like what you call them in this world and Pixter, right? Nobody ever knows how to use that. And I feel like I see that a lot with our young people who have never not grown up with without technology, like they've always had that around. So to see a character that also just grew up on that is like really interesting to see in a book instead of just what we're seeing here in our real world now. So I really like that, Marie loves technology, but soon also realizes the danger of technology and social media in her book. And of course, she doesn't really know what climate change is or what happened.
Yeah. And so much of like what the real world like outside of Versailles is hidden from her. So I could only get into like too much of what the event was. But I imagine it as our worst case scenario if climate change gets so bad, we have giant wars over resources and water and food. So there's a lot of the world isn't even like habitable and there's not as many people as there used to be. But because we don't have a lot of history and things left over from the past is able to repeat itself because nobody learned from it because nobody knew.
Yeah. Which I figure is a huge theme in your book. We have to know our history to not repeat it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, where is it? Oh, I love this. Your book has such fun vocab that I was like, I could easily see us using this slang, right? In today's world, like I'm buffering out or I'm glitching out, or that, like, what was the other one? Like my server is overloaded with information, things like that. Like that's very techy. What inspired the cyberpunk fashion in your book and also all the new slang in your book?
For this slang, I think like glitching was the first thing I came up with. And it was just like, I don't know, I thought it was fun and I was trying to be like very voicey since it's this first person book. So I started to throw in other little slangs and then my editor really liked it after Harper Teen got the book and said, oh, can you do more? So I sat and I just came up with a list of like techie terms that I felt like sounded like an emotion too, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like backbiter, I came up with as an insult because it sounds like one, but it's like a real term that means I don't even remember what it means, but it's a real tech term. So.
Yeah, there's so much in there. But I mean, that's kind of how slang is made, right? Like in our modern world, we attach a word to an emotion, but I love that detail in your book because it really brought us toward the future. I think some books try a historical fiction or like a future book, but the verbiage stays the same. And I think because you switched out the verbiage to in this future world, it really made it feel like, oh, I'm really in this world where tech is just everywhere and it's normal. Because the first time I read one of your words, I was like, what is this? Like it caught me off guard, like this is a new world. And by the end of it, I was totally on board. Like this is kind of catchy.
Yeah, I was going to say for the fashion, I really just went on Pinterest and collected boards of like cyberpunk and vaporwave fashion and looked up people wearing LEDs. And if I had to describe an outfit, I usually like picked an actual picture and tried to describe elements of it. So
I know, I think I've seen your boards on your social media. And it's so gorgeous. I think all the outfits Marie tries and all the different styles inside Versailles and then also the Austerland sounds so cool. Like that would be so awesome to actually see come to life like on a screen,
Yeah.
You're so detailed.
Maybe someday. It could happen. I think a comic book would be really cool too.
Oh yeah. This would be such a cool magazine, honestly. Just Cake Eater with Marie would be such a stunning magazine to have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I'm gonna think about that.
Yeah. Here's a kind of like a silly question. Besides Louis, do you have a favorite Bourbon family member? Because they're all kind of difficult to deal with.
I would say the easy answer is Elizabeth because she's not as snarky as the boys and she's more like Louis-esque. If I ever did a sequel, I think there'd definitely be more Elizabeth in it. She's definitely interesting to me. And in real life, she and Louis the 16th were like the closest out of the siblings.
Was that because of age or because more personality?
I think it was a combination of she was one of the younger siblings. Or no, she was the youngest. For history, like he had so many siblings where like one of them had smallpox when they were really young.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember if she's really the youngest, but she was the youngest living sibling. Yeah, I think it was a combination of her age. I mean, the boys were really competitive with Louis, so they didn't have the same like competition and rivalry going on.
Do you have a soft spot for the brothers at all? or it's just
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I'd say definitely, just because they're like they're so extra. Like there's so many like the stuff I put in the book is really inspired by stuff I read about the real people, and like they were just so dramatic. It was a really dysfunctional family.
What
It
was
was
his
really
brother?
fun to read
Stan,
about.
right? It's Stan.
Yeah,
So
Stan.
did you actually like Stan a little? Because I had a hard time finding any redeeming quality except for maybe that, some scene at the end, maybe. But that
Mhm.
looked more, that looked better on Louis than him. So I don't know how I feel about Stan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a soft spot for almost all the characters. He's definitely a brat, but he feels like, oh, I should have been king. I'd be better at it. And probably to an extent, Louis would have been happy to let him have the role instead.
Yeah.
So Stan's clever. Like I said, if I did sequels or something, it wouldn't be the last we've seen of him either. So
Yeah. And definitely Louis is, for all those introverted readers out there, he's an introverted main character, which is rare to see.
yeah,
Yeah. I love that.
especially for the guys.
Mhm.
I don't see a lot of like soft spoken, geeky guys, the lead male in a story. So that was fun to do.
Yeah, you would definitely think Stan would be like the main
Mhm.
character instead of Louis, which he
Yep.
wishes he was.
Yes. In his mind, he is. So,
I was so excited when I saw Axel show up in the book because I know about that like story. The real Axel, if you don't know, the real Axel von Fersen had a detailed and intimate role in Marie Antoinette's life. He also makes an appearance in Cake Eater. How did you decide how much he was or wasn't a part of this Marie story compared to the real one?
it took some thinking. Of course, the rumor is that they had an affair, or at the very least, they had a really close friendship. Like, we know for sure that Marie Antoinette and Fersen were close friends. He was also pretty good friends with Louis the 16th. And basically, like, I think, like, people like to argue online about whether they really had an affair. And
Mhm.
basically, the answer is who knows? We can't ask them, and we don't have solid evidence. So I guess I wanted to think of it as more like, well, this will definitely add some drama. And I was thinking, like, what element can I add to Fersen to make him interesting and to like justify having him in the story beyond just like the drama of she has
Yes.
someone else giving her attention. And then the androids element came in, and I said, "Ooh, Fersen's got to be an android." That would really throw
That
things for a
was
loop.
so cool. That was it just I gasped when I was reading about the androids and then they were like, that's Axel. And I said, she did not. She made Axel the android. I loved it though. Like I had so much fun reading how charming he was and how he was like built for that, even though it was really shady. So did you have fun creating him and making him an android? And did you have a soft spot for him as well, or were you kind of like merciless in the way you were writing him?
I relate to Louis on some levels, and my partner reminds me a lot of Louis. So like I have a Louis soft spot. So
Aw.
at first I think Axel felt like, oh, this is the rival. And I did not have a soft spot for him. But the
Yeah.
more I wrote him, the more I did. And I think that there's like definitely a tragic part to his story with his status as an android. And the more I played with that, like the more interesting he became to write. He's an android, but he has a lot of personality. So we see him struggle with that and
Yeah.
having relationships with non-androids.
I think there's certain scenes in the book where you finally see him bring out some more emotion that even touched me a little bit because I was also anti-Axel for a little bit. But that's why I was curious because he started off as more of a soldier, less of a person.
Yep.
And then when the story goes along, I kind of see your writing change a little bit around him. So I was curious. But I do wish we saw a bit more of him in the book. I liked him so much. I wanted more drama.
Definitely, again, if there is a sequel, I think androids would play a huge part. Like, I think we just opened a can of worms of what androids in this world might
Yeah.
mean.
I was so curious. Just there's so many questions I had around him and how he was programmed and everything. There's so many secrets here, and I think by the end of it, we get what we need, but there's so much more. So for you, like, is there so much more you could write and so many more secrets that we have to learn still?
I would say so. I definitely have ideas about like where the story goes from here. Marie Antoinette felt like, oh, this is like one story, but there's so many other figures in her life that would continue the story and be interesting to read and write about. I'm also really interested in the revolutionaries, so I would definitely like write about them in this world too. I'm a debut author, so it's a little easier to pitch something as a standalone book and then see how it does.
Mhm.
Hopefully there'd be enough interest in a sequel one day that we can go deeper into the secrets and some of the things that we should have delved more into by the end of the
Yes,
book.
that was definitely a top question of mine. I'm like, I don't know if I can ask her this, but will we see a sequel? Because toward then, I'm like, I want to know more. I want to know more about Marie's world and everything else that happens, and even the past, because there's just so much we don't know.
I'm definitely okay with writing one and have some plans. The rest will be like up to my publisher, really. Hopefully it catches on and people really like it and want a sequel, and then it'll happen.
Yes, yeah.
That's
For
pretty
everyone
much where I'm
watching
at.
this, buy the book. Make sure you buy. I've talked about the book before. I'm talking about it again. Buy the book. Support. We need a sequel. I need a sequel. I want to see it happen. Okay, a little bit more about your writing. You talked a little bit about all the other characters, but I'm really curious. Did you become emotional during any of the scenes as you were writing them or like rereading them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I can't say the big ones. Yeah, like toward the end of the book, there's a certain scene, and I would say I dreaded sitting down to write it. Even the first, like, I would say like 3 drafts of the book, it was really hard every time. And I dreaded drafting it. Like, it came to be like the night when I got home from work and knew, like, okay, this is the scene I got to write tonight. And I really didn't want to do it. And when it was done, I felt like so emotionally exhausted. Like I just
Oh my
dealt with
God.
something with a real person. So,
I think I know what scene you're talking about, and we can talk about it a little bit off camera, maybe. But you made me sob in this book, honestly. Like
oh,
I felt so much for these characters, and there's certain scenes that I was just sitting at my desk, like during my lunch break, like sobbing. Like
oh
this
no.
is happening. Automatically, I was like 5 stars. She made me cry. Like 5 stars. I love it. Did you have Marie and Louis' story planned out right from the start, or did it change?
It has changed a couple times. Like when they're real people, it was really hard to decide like how well based on real people anyway. I like how much do I have to stick to history to satisfy people that are reading it because they know this story and they like this story or they're interested in the story,
Yeah.
and like how much should I be surprising a reader? They're going to say, well, I know how it ends, so why read the whole
Yeah.
thing? It definitely, like, I definitely changed my mind a few times in the process of writing it, or just like got guidance from either my agent or my editor of what their opinion was. So it was a lot of like fine tuning to try to
Yeah.
get that line of this does justice to the historical event and this is like new and surprising.
Yeah. I love your twist throughout your book because I'm also a big Marie Antoinette geek. So maybe that's why I also enjoyed this a lot. I was like, I wondered the same thing. I was like, oh, I wonder if the author will kind of, march to the tune of the regular Marie or add something different. And again, everyone should read it to find out what actually happens in this book.
The ending seems controversial for sure. Like I think people either really like it or they really hate it, and that's fine. I think it is what it is. So
Really? That's so surprising. I wonder why people dislike it so much. Is it just because they want it to be told like the way it is, or
yeah, I think some people had a set idea of how it should go, or some people maybe wanted more of a happily ever after. Like, I think there's a couple different reasons.
yeah,
So,
a lot of fans that follow you can see that you really got in deep with Marie Antoinette, and researching everything around her. There's some things even I learned through you that I had no idea. Like she had going on like her letters with her mom. Did you come out feeling more emotionally attached to the real Marie at the end of this, or did you feel like you made a whole new and like bigger connection with your Marie because you were developing your story?
yeah, I would say a little bit of both. My Marie is definitely, I feel like her own character, especially since, like I totally changed the timeline of the book. The real Marie Antoinette had her teenage years and then like her young mom years and then her older mom years. There's a lot of the real Marie Antoinette that isn't like represented in Cake Eater. But I definitely felt more attached to the real Marie Antoinette too, because I'm also part of that. Like in pop culture, we're fed like such a one-dimensional image of Marie Antoinette. And even though I
Yeah.
have that interest in her, I still mostly knew her as like, oh, she had the big giant dresses that are really cool.
Hmm.
I knew she didn't say let them eat cake. Like I'd heard that debunked before. I still just thought of her as like she just was a fluffy princess that lived in her tower and bread riots came and oh well, that's what happens when you're rich and a monarch and your people are
Yeah.
starving. But the more I read and saw her for her personality, I did feel for her and I did become attached to her because I saw like, oh, like she was a kind person that was nurturing and I
Mhm.
don't think ever wanted to see anyone suffering, but she was a woman in a time period where she had like zero political power, so what was she going to do? So I definitely felt more attached to her at the end.
And I think you did show that side of Marie in your book because there are movies out there of Marie Antoinette in this spin, but I feel like they mainly show that she just had no control over,
Mhm.
the court, but they don't really show the other side, which is she's a teenager and she's emotional and she's homesick. And you do such a beautiful job of showing those parts of Marie in your book where she does miss home. She still speaks in her language now and then. She misses her fashion and all of that. I definitely felt like you were like telling the real Marie's story while still keeping like your Marie as her standalone character. So definitely we have to ask this question. Most authors get asked for like writing tips. I just wanted to ask like what would be your top writing tip?
Oh, my top one. I feel like the best tips people have said many times, which is like write as often as you can and read a lot. And those are definitely true. Try to hang on to having fun with your writing because it really is the most important part. It's what will make your writing and your voice sound like you. And whether you decide to try to publish your writing or not, or whether you decide to be traditionally published or self published, at some point it will start to feel more like a job and
Mhm.
you will have to keep having fun with it or I think ideas dry up and
Yeah.
writer's block happens. So I would say just have fun. It's super important.
Well, the last little segment I have is this or that, which I think is always really fun to do with an author because you wrote all these things, but I'm always curious like what your favorite part of these things are, right? First one, Australians fashion or Frank fashion?
Oh, that's so hard. I appreciate French or Franc fashion, but I think I would go with Austerlands and all the colors and Marie style.
Would you rather go to a Paris rave or a Versailles party?
Probably the rave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say the rave.
I think you answer this, but Axel or Louis?
Oh, definitely Louis.
Louis. Well, that
Yeah,
reminds me of your husband, so I would hope so,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Prince Philippe Bourbon or Princess Therese? Is it de Lamballe?
Oh yeah, Therese de Lamballe.
De Lamballe.
I gotta go with Therese.
Yeah,
Like
just
I like Philippe, he's fun, but Therese.
Versailles or Le Petit Trianon.
Petit Trianon. I've seen underneath all the corruption of Versailles, so
Yeah, you're like,
it's
I've
never my
had
answer, I
it.
guess.
Trying to escape like Marie. I love this. This is a specific like fashion stuff in her book, but gel glow or LED infinity mirrors.
Probably Gel Glow. I like colors, so
I know,
yeah.
I still think that sounds way cooler than the LED mirrors. Yeah. Attend a picture photo shoot with Marie or a lesson on hacking with Louis.
I might just do the photo shoot just because like I've done coding for my job. It's not my favorite
Oh,
thing. So
I have no idea. Yeah, it definitely sounds fun. Like she's definitely that great gal pal that will set you up for success on a photo shoot. As an
yeah,
introvert, sometimes you need that.
I think you leave it feeling great. And while Louis, I'm sure, is a good teacher, that'll show you some things. Like that's gonna be a slog. He's gonna overload you with information.
Oh, definitely. I'm just gonna geek out all the way. Well, this was so fun. I definitely got to ask so many questions. I just was so excited to talk about with you. Well, thank you so much for writing and thinking about it and just being so creative with it because I just loved it and I geek out about it to anyone who listens.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much because only people like you that read it and loved it will like make a sequel happen or a movie or graphic novel or something.
Okay.
So
Yes. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed asking Allyson all my questions. Go off, make sure you buy this beautiful book. You will not regret it. It's amazing. And like you saw in the interview, we need a sequel. I need a sequel. Go buy the book. Thanks for watching. Bye.